Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I have something that I've been working on for a while now. So this video is going to be 10 witchy romances that I have read recently so that you don't have to, because honestly some of these were pretty rough, but let's just get right into the video. So if you watched my September wrap-up, I think it was, or maybe my October TBR video, I mentioned that I wanted to do a witchy romance rec video, and that was originally what this video started out as. It was just going to be like cozy, witchy romance recommendations, but honestly, so many of these that I read were not good that instead I've obviously changed the title of this video and changed sort of the concept to sort of fit with what I have to work with here. These are all going to be books that I find are personally, they're not like hardcore like fantasy or paranormal. They are paranormal in the sense that like they deal with witches, but I just feel like they don't have such a strong fantasy element to them. They're much more what I would consider like a cozy, witchy romance, sort of along the lines of anything that could fall into the realm of Halloween Town, which is like one of my favorite Halloween movies. So these books are usually right up my alley. I read 10 of them, obviously, as you can tell by the title of this video. So I'm just going to go through these in the order that I read them, tell you what I thought about them, which ones I think are worth the read, which ones I think you should skip, and a little bit about each book. So the first one I actually read last year. It is the only one on this list that I did not read within the past month or two, and that is the Ex Hex by Erin Sterling. This I feel like is the most popular book in this sort of, I don't know if this is like a trope or I guess like sub-genre, niche genre, whatever you want to call it. I'm sorry the sun just like disappeared, but this one I feel like is the most popular. This is the first in a series. I'm hoping there's going to be 3 books. The second one just came out this year. It is one I'm also going to talk about in this video, but this one follows a girl named Vivi who basically goes through a breakup and decides she's going to cast this little hex on her ex. And at the time she's kind of doing it with like, you know, like a Bath and Body Works candle type thing, and she's not really thinking anything of it. She's like, oh, this is just gonna make me feel better, like nothing's gonna happen to him. And now I believe it's 9 years later he shows up. Yes, 9 years later he shows up and all these bad things are happening to him, and she's like, maybe I actually did hex this guy. And he is back for the fall festival and to recharge the town's ley lines, because the town is like built on his family's magic. And this one is really cute. I gave this one 4 stars. I think this is one that is really good if you're searching for like the cozy, witchy vibes. It definitely has that. The plot itself is not anything super spectacular, but I did think it was really good for what I was looking for when it came to these kinds of books. So this is one that I would definitely recommend. I really enjoyed this one. Next is Go Hex Yourself by Jessica Clare. This is one that I do not see a lot of people talking about, and I think it's because it was released in the spring, I think, of this year, so sort of a weird time to release a witchy book, but I am obsessed with this book. I gave this one 5 stars. It is hands down my favorite in this entire video. This was just so good, and I don't know if I just like read this at the right time, that it just like hit different, or like what it was, but this was so freaking good. I have turned into like the personal cheerleader for this book. Like anyone that asks, I am hyping up this book. And this one follows a girl who sees an ad in a newspaper for a job for what she thinks is a card game that she plays, basically sort of along the lines of Magic the Gathering, where she's like collecting these cards and she's really into the game and like building her own decks and all this stuff. And she shows up thinking that this job is related to that, but she shows up and it's actually a job for a witch's familiar. And she doesn't believe in magic, she doesn't think witches are real, and there's this old woman living in this house, and her nephew is also there, and the old woman is like, oh, of course I'm a witch, and the girl interviewing her is the witch's current familiar, but she's going on like maternity leave because she's pregnant. And so she's like, oh, of course she's a witch, like what are you talking about? And this girl thinks like, okay, this woman is just like old and senile and like just thinks she's a witch, so you know, maybe for the right amount of money I could play along with that. And so she takes the job thinking she's just gonna be like cleaning her house and cooking her food and like doing her laundry and whatever, but she is literally a witch, and it is her nephew that she has the romance with, and he is so grumpy, definite like I hate everyone in the world but you vibes with him. He hates her at the beginning because she's walking around saying magic's not real and blah blah, and basically just like insulting his entire family, and it's just such a good enemies to lovers. It has so many like Halloween Town vibes in this one. Like I said, that was pretty much what I was looking for when it came to these books. This is also going to be the first in a series. The next one is coming out next year, which I'm really excited for because they actually teased the couple for that book at the end of this one, and I think that one is going to be really good as well. So this one, if like you take one recommendation from this video, take this one because this was so good. Next was Not the Witch You Wed by April Asher. This is also, I believe, the first in the series. I don't think the second one is out yet. I think it comes out next year. And this one was good. I think I gave this 3 stars. To be honest, this one had a little too much sort of world building, I guess, to it for me, but more in the sense that it dealt with a lot of the laws of this sort of land that they were living in. And I think I wasn't really interested in that, and so for that aspect, I didn't love it as much. I'm pretty sure I gave this 3 stars, like I said. And I did enjoy it. Like, the romance was cute. I believe he's an alpha shifter, and she is a witch, if I remember correctly. I feel like I'm getting these books all mixed up in my head now because I've read so many of them. But I'm pretty sure that was this one, and he basically, both of them need to find a person to marry, or else the council or someone is going to find them their own mate, and so they just decide they're going to like fake date to get these people off their backs. But they were actually together at one point in the past, so it's like second chance and fake dating and all of that. So it is like really good in that aspect. Like, I did enjoy that. I just, like I said, got a little confused with the world building in this one and all the laws and things that were going on, but it was really good in like the romance aspect, so I'm excited to see where the second book goes with this one. Next was Small Town Big Magic by Hazel Beck. This one I did an entire rant review on because I read that before I knew I was going to do this video, or else I probably would have just saved it for this video. This book was truly awful. I will link that video down below, by the way, if you haven't seen it and you want to know more detail on why I hated this book so much. Gave it 1 star. Honestly think that was being generous. Like, it was just an absolute train wreck of a book. This is described as a rom-com, and it's pitched as being like the Ex Hex and Payback's a Witch. And I haven't read Payback's a Witch yet because I just can't seem to get the hold on it from my library. And I've heard good things though, so I feel like I have high hopes for that, and I love the Ex Hex, like I said, and I just feel like this was nothing like either of those books. Like I said, I haven't read Payback's a Witch, but I can't imagine it is this bad because this was awful. The main character in this book is super arrogant. She is the kind of person that finds out about magic and the next day automatically thinks she knows everything about it and how to like save everybody and whatever, and all her friends are constantly warning her like, don't do this, you shouldn't be doing that, and she's like, oh no, of course, like I can do it because I'm better than all of you, basically. She was just super irritating. She was all about the like girl boss, anti-patriarchy, blah blah blah, like, which like I get, like if you want to put that in your book, that's not a problem with me, but it was brought up so much in this book that I feel like at times it was just irrelevant, like it didn't belong where they were trying to squeeze it in. My biggest beef with this book is there is a quote that I practically have memorized because I've read it so many times because it makes me so angry, and that is, like I said, this book very big on anti-patriarchy and feminism and all that, which are like good things, but this book went too far, I think. And like I said, this book is labeled a rom-com. It's not. I'm going to tell you that right now. The romance in this sucks. The male lead in this is so boring, and I've never really said that about a male lead in a book, but he was just so uninteresting. There was nothing interesting about him at all. He was just like this guy on the sidelines, and that was it, and he was just watching her be annoying, and then they get together, and I was like, okay. But my big issue with this book was there's a part where you don't get a ton of romance, and you get 1 chapter where her and this guy are finally sort of talking things out. They're figuring out where their relationship's at, and you know what's, you know, what with them, and they're kind of just like, okay, were we together in the past, are we getting together now, like where is this headed, kind of thing. And that was fine. And then they start like making out, and you know, you're building up to like what would have been the only sex scene in the book, and instead of that you get to this point where they're like on the cusp of doing it, and then you get this quote that's something, it's like, it's from her perspective, and it says something like, I would tell you every detail, I almost want to, but you know who I am by now. I'm not here for the objectification of women or men, or the glorification of sensuality for consumer commodification. And the fact that I can remember that quote off the top of my head is insane, because I don't remember book quotes ever, but that one just made me so angry that I do remember it. that is, like I said, that is in the place of what would have been the only sex scene, and I just think, like, it's fine if you want to have a closed-door book, but this book literally just seemed to be thinking that they were superior because they didn't have a sex scene, and I just think you're really marketing to the wrong people if you're selling this as a romance and then claiming that you are somehow, you know, more of a feminist or more of, you know, whatever, because you didn't put that in a book. Like, I was so done with this book by that point. Like I said, 1 star, I hated this book, will never pick up anything from these authors again because it was truly atrocious. But anyway, I felt like I had to include this one because it was one of the 10 that I read, but like I said, I wouldn't even consider this a romance, so I don't know that it necessarily falls in this video, but it is marketed as a romance, so I think that's important to note. Next is The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling. This is the second book that goes with the Ex Hex. This is the new one that came out this year. This one follows a girl who is, I believe she's the cousin of the girl in the first book, but they're also best friends. And she is mad at the girl from the first book's husband's brothers because they didn't go to their wedding. And she's like, that's such a jerk move, like, you guys suck, blah, blah, blah. She hates the brothers. And then one of the brothers shows up in the town and he's just like decided he's gonna live there. And she runs a business selling sort of like tacky, touristy, witchy things on this street, and this guy ends up deciding he's going to open the same kind of shop across the street from her, but he's going to make it like more upscale, and so he's kind of doing that, and so there's like, she already hates him, and then now he's like stepping on her turf basically. So this one is really cute, enemies to lovers. I gave this one 4 stars as well. I really enjoyed it. I think I might have actually liked this one better than the Ex Hex. I liked the sort of enemies to lovers vibe of this one, and just like they're going back and forth, I thought was really cute, and it did have a good amount of like witchy content, which I also appreciate. Next was Hex Appeal by Kate Johnson. This one was interesting. I felt like this one leaned a little too hard on the fantasy maybe for me. This one follows a guy who inherits a house, and he shows up and he finds out that he's actually the landlord for like a ton of other houses, and they haven't paid rent in a long time. So he starts looking for these houses to like collect all this back rent. And there's this one house that he can't seem to find, but he's like, they owe like 300 years in back rent. And I feel like that in itself was like a big plot hole, because like, did this guy think the same people had been living there for 300 years and they were just gonna pay all the back rent at once? Like, I never really got that part. But he goes looking for this house to get all this back rent, and he can't find it. Every time he goes down the street, he's just like, oh, I guess it's not here, can't find it. He forgets what he's doing, goes home. And basically this house he's looking for is owned by a bunch of witches. And you can't find the house unless you need it, or unless you're with one of the witches, or like something like that, you know, like it's hidden from the public basically. So he ends up in the house, and it's very Encanto-esque because the house has all these like magical things going on. And it was just like, there was a lot going on in this book. I gave it 3 stars. This one was like okay, but definitely not one of my favorites, or one that I think I would revisit. It just, like I said, had a lot going on and just seemed very sort of chaotic. And also, like, most of this book was about the house. There wasn't really a lot romance-wise. I felt like we were missing a lot of that, and that was kind of sad. But like, overall, it was like an okay read. Next, I read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandanna. This one has been definitely making the rounds this year, and this one was good. I gave it 4 stars. I did really enjoy it, but there's like a recurring theme here, you'll notice in a lot of the books I've been reading lately, where the romance just wasn't, to me, a main plotline in this. This one follows Micah, who is a witch, but in this specific world that she lives in, witches aren't allowed to live near each other because there's too much magic in the air when they do. And so they all have to live, you know, very far apart, and they only see each other once every 3 months. And she sort of feels very isolated. She doesn't have any like human friends because she feels like she can't share this witchy part of herself with them. And she doesn't have any witch friends because they have to live, you know, miles and miles away from each other. And so she's kind of lonely, and one day she decides she's going to start posting YouTube videos pretending she's a witch, because she's like, then I can talk about this witchy stuff, people will think it's fake, and I can just basically like meet friends maybe like online. So she does that, and she ends up getting a letter from this guy saying, we have 3 young witches and we need a tutor for them, so like, can you come to this house and tutor them? And she's like, okay, that's really weird because like 3 witches shouldn't be together, and how would these people even know that I'm a real witch? And she's like, something is off here, but she decides like, what the heck, I'm gonna go. So she goes, she shows up to this house, there's 3 young witches, and a lot of this revolves around her sort of dealing with these young kids and teaching them about magic, and there's this guy, Jamie, who is a grumpy librarian who works at this house, and he is the love interest in this book. Like I said, I found this one didn't focus a ton on the romance. I felt like most of the romance stuff was toward the end. I did love, there was 2 guys that were married that were like an older couple in the book. They were like in their 70s or 80s, I think, and they were really funny. There's one, Ian, who was like constantly trying to get the 2 of them together, like Jamie and Micah, and I thought he was really fun, and I liked him, and I liked all the characters, but I just felt like the romance wasn't the forefront of the story, which is kind of what I was hoping for. So I did give this one 4 stars just for like atmosphere and general liking of the book, but it doesn't, I find, focus a ton on the romantic plotline in this one. Now this is where things started to go downhill for me. And I don't know if it was because I was trying to find 10 books to do this video that I was sort of picking ones that I hadn't seen people talk about, or what, but these next 3 were just like not that great, to be honest. The first one was A Letter to 3 Witches by Elizabeth Bass, or Bass, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, but this one was just bad, to be honest. It was so boring. I gave this one 2 stars, 1 star, I don't remember. Well, I want to say 2 stars. And this one, like the whole plot line of this was just kind of boring. Like, I don't know how this book was even written, because I read the synopsis and I was like, okay, maybe this is one of those books where the synopsis is just vague and maybe the actual book itself is much more interesting, and it was just not. This book follows a cousin, I think it is, that sends a letter to 3 of her other cousins and basically says, I'm moving and I'm taking one of your spouses with me. But it's sort of implied that this spouse is going to be like under a hex or a spell or something to go with her. And so she's moving to New York, and she goes, when she drops these letters off, she moves right away, like she's already gone. And she's like, I'm coming back on Friday, or like the spouse is coming with me on Friday or whatever. And so these 3 cousins are like, oh my gosh, she's going to take one of our boyfriends or husbands or whatever. And they're all freaking out. And I didn't really get that. I don't know, this book was just so weird. There was so much cheating in this. It was like as soon as they got this letter, it was like a free-for-all for them to hook up with whoever they wanted to. And it was just so weird. And I didn't really understand like why they were all panicking this like week leading up to the husband or spouse going with the cousin. Because I was like, wouldn't it just make more sense to wait to see which one was even taken, and then you could figure out a plan to get him back? Like, why are they all panicking for this week beforehand? And of course, none of their husbands are like in the area, right? Like, they're all off on research trips or like doing whatever, so they're not even in the same city. And so they're all just like panicking that these like boyfriends are gonna leave them and whatever for this cousin. And it was just so stupid. Like, I didn't get this one at all. And I don't know, like, I don't know what the point of this was supposed to be. I wouldn't even call this a romance. Like, I don't know why all these books are being labeled romances. Like, I don't even think there was a strong romance plotline in this. Like I said, it's just a bunch of people who already have partners that end up seeing all these other people, and it was just, like, not good. And I don't know, like, I couldn't figure this one out. I really couldn't. Like I said, I gave it 2 stars. This was one of those books I read and I finished and I was like, what on earth did I just read? Like, I don't even know what to say about this one because there was just nothing to say. I also didn't really understand why they cared, because honestly, like, 2 out of the 3 of them didn't even seem to care about their boyfriends or husbands. Like, they were just like, oh, whatever, we're splitting up anyway. And I was like, why do you even care that your cousin's taking him then? Like, does it matter? I don't think it does. Next was Witch Please by Anne and Aguirre. This one I gave 2 stars to, I think. This one I technically, if you want to get really technical, technically I DNF'd this one. I did not listen to the last, I think, 2 hours of the audiobook, because by that point I had zoned out for so much of this that I was like, even if I listen to this last bit of this audiobook, I'm not going to pay attention. Because I could not get past the guy in this book. He was just so creepy. Honestly, like, that's the only way I can think to describe him. The back of this book, you know, tells you that he's like a 31-year-old virgin, which I was like, you know what, fine, like, I'm all for, like, representation of all kinds, so whatever, who cares? And so I read the book, and this guy was just like, I feel like there's one thing, there's like being a 31-year-old virgin, and then there's being like creepy and a 31-year-old virgin, and this guy was the creepy version. He was instantly obsessed with this girl, like, the moment he saw her, and I swear it's just because she looked his direction. Like, he was already plotting their, like, 2 to 5 kids in his head, and, like, planning their future houses and weddings and whatever. Like, he was 10 steps ahead of where they were, and they had like practically just met, and it was just really, really creepy. And I feel like I saw a review on Goodreads actually that said that he gave off incel vibes, and I could totally see that, because he was just like, I couldn't get into it, like into rooting for him to get with her, because I genuinely felt like she could have been any girl walking down the street that looked at this guy for a second too long and he just became obsessed with them. And I didn't care about the plot line. It wasn't that interesting. Like I said, the guy was super creepy, so I wasn't invested in the romance either. This one just felt really, really flat for me, and yeah, didn't love this one. Lastly was Witchful Thinking by Celestine Martin. I was really excited about this one. I really love the cover of this one. I think it's so pretty. And this one, like I said, was kind of a letdown, but I think out of the ones that I didn't like in this video, this one I think has the most potential. Like, I would be open to reading another book from this author if they were to come out with another book in this series, because I do think they have potential. This book just wasn't, I think, executed well enough. There was a lot going on, and I ended this book with more questions than answers, which I don't love when that happens. And this one follows a witch who basically ends up dating a merman, and I felt like it was never really addressed, like this town they're living in, if it was all magical people, or like people knew that they were like merman and witch, and like it just was never talked about. And I was like, okay, they're just walking down the street and this guy has scales on his face, like people must know, right? Like, and I just feel like that was never discussed. And I was like, okay, weird, but whatever. And this follows a girl who makes a wish, basically, for her life to be more exciting. But it's like a spell, so obviously things go wrong, and she ends up getting all this kinds of crazy stuff. But there wasn't a lot of explanation regarding this wish. Like, as she gets closer to this guy, she's like, oh, well, what if it's just the witch causing us to get closer? But they were like, oh, the wish doesn't last that long. But they never really talked about how long it did last or what effects it could have on them. It was just kind of there, and I was like, okay, what's happening? But basically, she's like, I want my life to be more exciting, and I feel like this was a lot more, like, it wanted to be more high stakes than it was, because, like, the exciting things she did were, like, entering a baking competition and singing karaoke in the back room of a restaurant. Like, it wasn't really, like, super crazy. Like, I would imagine, like, skydiving or something if you said you wanted your life to be more interesting. Like, I don't know. I just thought it was kind of underwhelming. There's a scene when she's doing karaoke that I thought was so over dramatic that I was kind of rolling my eyes, because she's singing karaoke literally in this back room of a restaurant. Like, nobody's there. And she's singing and her mic dies while she's singing. And she makes some comment in her head like, oh my gosh, everyone's gonna film this and I'm gonna be the next viral disaster and blah blah blah. And I was like, you're singing karaoke in the back room of a restaurant in your little small town. Like, you're not making the news for this. This isn't the Grammys that you're opening or anything. And it just seemed like they were putting so much emphasis on these things that didn't need it. Like, that wasn't a big deal. You were in the back of a restaurant singing karaoke. You were not, again, opening the Grammys. Like, this was not a big deal. And I just didn't like that, like, over dramatization of things, because I thought it was unnecessary and just made me roll my eyes again. Like I said, I would be open to reading another book from this author, because I think this did have potential. I really loved the little carnival they were at the beginning. I thought that scene was really cute. I did like some, you know, aspects of the plot, but I just felt like it wasn't fleshed out enough. There wasn't enough detail given or answers provided. You also don't get a ton of information about Alex, who's like the main merman love interest. Literally all you know about him is that he doesn't like putting down roots anywhere and that he is a photographer. That's all the information you get about him over the course of the entire book. And I was like, why is she in love with this guy? Like, what does she see in him? What does he do? Like, blah, blah, blah. And there was, like, nothing. Like, you hardly got any information about who he was as a person. And I thought that was kind of a letdown. But, like I said, the author has potential. I'd be open to reading another book in the series if she's doing that. I'm not sure if she's writing a series, because this book was sort of weird in that there's so much detail about her cousin. And I don't know why that was in there, unless the author is planning to write another book about the cousin, because we get so much information about her and then we're kind of left on like a sort of a cliffhanger with her at the end. Like, we don't know what happens with her, and so maybe there's going to be another book. I don't know. I haven't seen anything about that. But this one, like I said, I gave this 2.5 stars, I think, and it was okay, but I did hope for more, I think, from this one for sure. But anyway, those are the 10 witchy romances that I read this year. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. I do new book videos every single week, and I will see you next time.